Hello everyone. Thank you for your coming to the second session of this K-Food lecture series. My name is Changju Song and I'm a senior lecturer in Asian Studies and Korean Studies at the University of Auckland in New Zealand. So let's start the second session, which we cover Joseon Dynasty and the opening year of culinary development in Korea. So basically what we will talk is throughout the Joseon Dynasty, which begins in the end of the 14th century and which ends at the end of the 19th century, and then the opening era, which is late 19th century and early 20th century, and during this time, how Korean culinary culture has changed. That's what we will cover. And specifically, we will talk about the Joseon Dynasty's Neo-Confucianism and its impact on the agricultural development. And we will also talk about the establishment of the predominant meal system in Korea today, which is composed of 밥, 반찬, and 국 system. And because this system developed during the Joseon Dynasty, so we will talk about it again a little bit more in detail. And thirdly, we will cover Korean bulgogi culture, which also developed during the Joseon Dynasty. So we will talk about it, and in addition, we will discuss how the previous era, in the end of Korea Dynasty, how Mongol invasion to Korea left culinary influence. And also, in the by 18th century, even in Korea, New World crops such as chili pepper, pumpkin, potato, sweet potato arrived. And now that will almost fundamentally change Korean culinary habits and cultures. And in the end of the 19th century, the arrival of Chinese cabbage, which had a tremendous impact on kimchi culture. And fifthly, we will talk about how with this new world food, especially chili pepper and Chinese cabbage, how these two things have formed the basis of contemporary kimchi that Koreans enjoy today. And then in the end, we will cover the opening era, which begins 1876 and ends 1910, and how Western and Japanese and Chinese culinary influence on Korean food culture. So basically that's what we will cover in this second session. And our goal is the audience will have understood how Korean food culture, the basis of Korean food culture developed during this Joseon Dynasty. And also the audience would have understood the predominant meal system, the 밥, 반찬, 국 system was developed in this era, together with fermented sauces. And also, the audience would have understood the Korean bulgogi culture's development with Mongol influence. And also, how the New World vegetables has impacted on Korean culinary culture, as well as the development of modern kimchi in the end of 19th century with the arrival of chili pepper and Chinese cabbage. And also, audience will have good understanding about how in the end of 19th century and early 20th century, during the opening era, modern Korean culinary life was shaped. Let's talk about the dominant ideology of the Joseon Dynasty, which is Neo-Confucianism, and how Neo-Confucianism actually promoted agricultural development during Joseon Dynasty. First of all, as we covered very briefly last session, the new elite who established the Joseon Dynasty, they adopted Neo-Confucianism. And why did they do so? Because they observed the previous Chinese dynasty, the Yuan dynasty and earlier Sung dynasty, how particularly Sung dynasty became so wealthy and prosperous economically and culturally. And they interpreted it as that it was economic development and also cultural development, and new elite, they wanted to learn and imitate the Sung dynasty's cultural prosperity as well as economic prosperity, and they thought it was all started with Confucianism, Neo-Confucianism particularly, which developed during the Sung dynasty in China. So that's why the new Joseon elite, including the kings, they tried very hard to teach this to the Korean people. Of course, it was not an easy process because there was normally whenever people face a new kind of ideas and thoughts and religions, there must be some resistance because we tend to stick to the old ideas. And that's why this was not easy. But Joseon elite was firm in promoting this particular idea, and eventually that was nearly completed by the late Joseon dynasty. Okay, so why then Neo-Confucianism is related with agriculture? It's because fundamentally Confucianism itself was very much based on agricultural community in ancient China. Of course, in ancient China, agriculture was the only industry, in a sense. So everything, people's thought and ideas and daily practices were solely centered on agricultural activities. And also, the government, especially Han Dynasty in China, which was one of the first dynasty that promoted not Neo-Confucianism, but old Confucianism, was very much promoted Confucianism. And because the only industry at that time was agriculture, they also promoted agriculture. And during Joseon Dynasty, the elite, started to publish books on many things, but particularly agricultural technology and rituals such as ancestral worship, because ancestral worship is a pillar of Neo-Confucianism. Why? Because in many religions, such as Christianity or Judaism, Islam, and so on, human beings are created by God. Not in Confucianism. In Confucianism, how are human beings created? Who created the human beings? That's your ancestors. And your ancestors are the product of their ancestors, and so on. And in agricultural society, ancestral wisdoms are very important. Human experience itself is very important, and normally old people have more knowledge because they have more experience. So younger people naturally would listen to older people and learn from them and obey to them. So this human relationship developed from agricultural society became the fundamental part of Confucian logic and ethics. And because this idea came from farming, among the many classes within the society, the farmers were particularly revered. And they occupied higher ladder in social and cultural ladder over artisans who makes things and tools, and merchants who are traders, farmers were always higher than these class. And during the Joseon Dynasty, influenced by the Neo-Confucian values, even utensils changed. For example, the bottles and plates, their color changed. The previous dynasty, Goryeo Dynasty, we all know that Goryeo Dynasty was famous for its greenish blue, so-called Cheongja. However, in Joseon Dynasty, the color changed, the shape changed, reflecting the Neo-Confucian ethic of simplicity and self-control. So as you see in this image, that's typical Joseon Dynasty white porcelain. The color is white, which signifies purity of mind, and then the paintings on it and decoration is minimal, and they reflect the calmness of the Confucian scholars. So you can see the drastic cultural changes from previous dynasty, Goryeo Dynasty, which was based on Buddhism and noble class, to more people-centered and Confucian ethics, which are very well reflected even in ceramic. We learned that Confucianism, Neo-Confucianism emphasis on agriculture, and agriculture is related to the offering rituals to deceased ancestors, and Joseon state particularly emphasized on rice cultivation because rice was one of the most important offerings in 제사 ritual. When you worship your deceased ancestor, you offer pure white rice together with some other food, which we will talk later. By the way, rice is staple food for about 34% of the global population. Rice, in this sense, is one of the most staple food for humanity even today. And archaeological evidence shows that rice was cultivated in Korea long before the AD, before Christ. We don't know exactly when, but new archaeological discoveries recently indicate that Korea was one of the first countries in East Asia which started to grow rice. And now, as I said, because that's why rice became the dominant and staple food for most people, and because this food was so nutritious compared to other grains, it gave life to people, and they offered this to their ancestors. I told you that it was during Joseon Dynasty the government started to publish agricultural books, and that's why in early Joseon Dynasty, Koreans developed very sophisticated technology on printing with metallic type. Everyone knows it. Korea was one of the first country which started to use metallic type. Until then, in China and Japan, both they were using wood, but Koreans were the first ones who started to use metallic types. And this development was related to Neo-Confucianism as well, because the Confucian elite need to publish books to teach people not only about agriculture, but also the principles of Neo-Confucianism, because that's the idea that government desperately tried to spread out to people. But then, of course, in China and also in Japan, there were good agricultural books, particularly in China. And why the Joseon Dynasty started to publish its own agricultural book? That's because these old Chinese agricultural books, the knowledges were depend on Chinese climatic environment, especially in Hebei area, where near today's Beijing. And the climate that area and the Korean peninsula is quite different. So if you follow the Chinese agricultural book, the time is not perfect and timing is very important. But if you sow your seed earlier than the seasonal optimal time, then you will fail. And that's why there was a need to revise these old, earlier Chinese agricultural books according to Korean natural environment. Okay, now one of the biggest reason why earlier Sung Dynasty in China became so wealthy was because of many things, including the Sung people's use of coal. The Europeans started to use coal in the early industrial era, as we know, but in China, already the Sung Dynasty people started to use coal. And that's huge technological advantage. But more than that, the Chinese had many new technologies, including the water mill. They were able to carry waters from streams and rivers to irrigate their field. And this kind of technology was very important in Sung Dynasty. And in that process, they developed a revolutionary technology in growing rice, which was a transplantation. Well, in Korean, it's called monegi, but this technology was really revolutionary because as soon as they started to use this technology, then the rice could be produced even more, and it reduces manpower as well. So Koreans wanted to learn it. And this technology, of course, would be spread out to other countries as well, Korea and Japan. But Korea was the latest country that started to use this technology because this technology was developed in Sung Dynasty, which was surrounding around the Yangtze River, where there is plenty of water and good amount of precipitation. However, and also in Japan, same, that Japan is a country of rain. It rains a lot. And throughout the year, the rain is spread out. And in Japan, you don't need to worry about water too much. But not in Korea. In Korea, they have high amount of precipitation, but the rain tends to be coming only in short period of early summer during the Changma season. So it didn't really fit to Korean natural environment, and that's why Koreans could adopt this technology only around 18th century. While in China, it was already widely spread out by the 12th century, and all in Japan, the 14th century. Okay, so that was the content of the first part of the week 2 lecture. We covered Neo-Confucianism and how Neo-Confucianism influenced on agricultural development in early Joseon Dynasty.